Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 136 of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to examining the works of writer, director, producer J.J. Abrams and his extended Bad Robot universe. I'm Matt Crandall, here with Marcelo Inostroza, as we continue to look at some of the feature film work of Jeffrey Abrams. And in 2008, he helped produce the found footage monster movie Cloverfield, directed by Matt Reeves. And this thing was notable because it is from the top down like a big Bad Robot production. And it is most notable for having like a very mysterious campaign around it. Nobody really knew what this movie was. There was a trailer that was attached to Transformers that they filmed specifically without even having the movie in the can. This teaser to get people excited. And then just the marketing being a headless Statue of Liberty and this weird title, Cloverfield. Marcelo, 2008 rolls around, Matt Reeves, written by Drew Goddard, produced by JJ. Cloverfield comes out. Are you hyped for it? And more importantly, are you aware of Garfield?
In 2008, I was just going into college because I took a year off after I graduated high school. And in 2008, I was just starting to fall in love with JJ as a filmmaker. I hadn't seen Felicity yet, so the big bang, the big moment for me didn't happen yet. But this Cloverfield movie, I didn't watch it in theaters, but I knew of it. I heard the legend of it. So when I finally sat down to watch it, I was just blown away because there was something so special about the way that Drew Goddard wrote this dialogue, the way that Matt Reeves directed this movie. There's something so human and there's something so relatable about the characters. And as outlandish as the situation is, from moment one to the last moment of this film, you are completely invested in wanting these people to make it out of the city alive because you care about them so much. And that wouldn't have worked if Matt Reeves and if Drew Goddard didn't inject humor, relatability, and sort of this, I like to call it bad robot sauce or bad robot style. And like you said in our open, this is like the most bad robot thing that we've talked about on the show. This movie in particular really delves into the DNA of Bad Robot as a studio, I feel.
Yeah, well, it definitely leans into what they would be most well known for, grounded sort of, this is sci-fi, but yet it's the characters and the dynamic is what's driving it. The fact that Rob is head over heels in love with this woman, Beth, that he has to go and find while this crazy thing is happening. And just being a high concept, character driven piece was interesting and isn't everyday blockbuster thing, but it's something that Bad Robot certainly likes to do. And this has, found footage was a genre that was pretty popular ever since. It wasn't the first movie to do it, but ever since Blair Witch, people always every few years try and do a found footage movie of some kind. This being, what if the found footage movie was Godzilla is novel and was unique. And the fact that it had this mysterious campaign where like they didn't really tell you what the movie was about. You weren't really sure. A lot of people thought it was a Voltron movie. They thought it was this other thing because JJ tried to pull this mystery box thing around the whole movie, without really telling you what it was. Even when it was released, like people still weren't sure what kind of movie this was going to be. They knew that it was some sort of sci-fi weird thing, but the fact that it was giant monster rampaging in New York City wasn't like a well-known fact at the time, which is very rare. So people flocked to this. It had a huge opening weekend because the mystery around it, and you could go online and there was a lot of mystery about the footage and what was going on, was like everywhere, everywhere. So the whole thing of this was like, what is Cloverfield actually about? And even by the end of it, you still are like, well, what the fuck does Cloverfield mean? Because I don't get it. And obviously we see the titles that explain that we are watching the footage that the U.S. Department of Defense has recovered and are watching after the fact. What's kind of unique about this movie is it happens at a time where you can't make this same movie now because social media and smartphones changed the game so much that like the fact that this one guy is really videoing HUD heads up display guy is videoing all these events and people are confused about what's happening because they can't just log on to Twitter and see 8,000 videos of the monster. Um, so I think it came out like right at the right time where cell phones were a thing, but smartphones weren't, because now you would have to make this movie as a period piece because with smartphones, everybody would know everything that was happening right away. And all the confusion that surrounds the first half hour of the movie would be sucked out. What are you thinking as we're introduced to our main characters through an old tape that's being taped over that is of Rob and Beth having a very special day, but then is taped over by Rob having a promotion that's going to send him far away, and his friends are making him a goodbye video. And obviously, Bad Robot fans will probably notice in the party scene early that Rob's brother Jason is wearing a Slusho t-shirt. But what do you think of this device of going away video for Rob that then turns into apocalyptic event video?
I really like the construction of this film with the video that Rob recorded with Beth after their romantic getaway to Coney Island being taped over with this apocalyptic event that happens during the farewell party for Rob. But the thing I like about this movie so much is the relationship between Beth and Rob that is sort of hinted at but isn't really explored that much. I mean, it's said in the film that Rob has had feelings for Beth since college. We know that they had this romantic section at the start of the movie, but we don't know really why they broke up. It's just said that Rob, for some reason, because of his promotion, he didn't want to egg Beth on. He didn't want to drag her along. So in order to spare her feelings, he broke up with her. And that causes the friction that we have when Beth shows up to the party with this other dude, because Rob hasn't talked to her in about 3 weeks. So I really love the emotional core of this movie. And to me, the emotional core of this movie is Rob and Beth. Without that, you just have a bunch of friends running around trying to get out of New York. But the fact that Rob wants to get to Beth and then they try to get out, and what happens when they try to get out, that compounds the excitement for me. Also, I love the way that this movie is cut, because it's cut in such a way that if you are like a dizzy person, you should not watch this movie, because you need like a box of fucking Dramamine, because it gave me agita sometimes, because I'm like, the picture is not filmed correct. The framing is all over the place because, of course, like you said, it's found footage. So I think that gives this movie a specific sense of style that is not present in every movie, because every movie is not found footage.
Thank God every movie isn't found footage because it's a concept that when done right works great, but when done poorly can just be insufferable. And this luckily is done right. And I do remember, and this movie famously, this happened everywhere. I saw it first show on the Friday that it opened, and I went back to see it the next day, and there were signs all over the theater the next day saying, if you buy a ticket for Cloverfield, you will get motion sickness. You, like, just warning people, the whole thing is shaky camera for 80 minutes and like lots of warnings, like this movie will make you feel sick. So I thought that's something that is like a piece of trivia that theaters had to do, because a lot of people on that opening night were feeling queasy because the movie, after the first 20 minutes, which is a little bit more contained because it's the party, the camera's moving, but not nearly as much, then it becomes, unhinged in the amount of movement. It can make you feel a little bit ill. And I think it's interesting that the first half hour of this movie is so great because we set up the characters in like an easy to digest way, and having the party and seeing everybody sort of cut loose and getting the like teen drama that's going on with these university age kids of like, oh, did you hear Rob and Beth slept together? Oh my God. Like that stuff is interesting. A lot of these people, they were new, but they weren't like super new. So they were a lot of like recognizable faces. seeing recognizable faces but not superstars meant that anybody could die. And as this movie goes on, many of them do. Many of them do. Not very many people actually make it out. And I think that added to the dynamic. But that beginning where we see Beth and Rob's good day and we sort of understand that these two people have a connection. And then when they split and we're like, oh, we're catching up that, okay, they are not together anymore. This is interesting. Makes us a little bit endeared to them so that when the shit does hit the fan, we start to care. And even something as simple as showing that Hud has a crush on Marlena and is really fumbling the bag when he's trying to like chat her up. That makes us like both of those characters more. Makes us like her because she's not falling for this guy's bullshit. And we just see this guy as like everyday Joe who's trying to get with a girl and can't do it. So that then later, when they're on the run for their lives and bad stuff starts to happen, we care a little bit more. And when the bad stuff starts happening, by having that initial power outage and then them watching the TV to see what's going on and not know what happened, but quickly follow that up with the head of the Statue of Liberty rolling into the street and the explosions and stuff that happens. And the fact that after that happens, we still have a couple of minutes before the running starts is what really works, because everybody is standing around being like, this is not an everyday thing that we should be seeing. The head of the Statue of Liberty in the middle of the road. This is kind of fucked up. What's going on? And especially after 9/11, you know, everybody's wondering, is this terrorists? What's happening here? And then as we get the first glimpse in the distance of the monster and Hud saying, whatever it is, it's alive. I got it on video, adds to the intrigue before the movie goes and shifts gears. So that first half hour that is quiet, is character based, and then starts to ramp up. This is a monster movie, I think is really effective. And they were also smart in the casting. You know, Beth is played by, at the time, her name was Odette Usman. Now she's Odette Annabelle because she married Dave Annabelle from Brothers and Sisters, which had a ton of Alias alums on it. Because even though she is not Megan Fox, when you first look at her, you're like, this chick looks like Megan Fox. And she was also like doing like some, you know, low level TV drama. She's on one of my least favorite shows of all time called October Road. It was a J.J. Abrams knockoff. It was Applebaum and Nemec, who worked on Alias and have worked with J.J. and wrote some Turtles and Mission movies. Them trying to do like a Felicity type show. And she was the female lead with Brian Greenberg from One Tree Hill as the main star. And it just had the worst dialogue and the worst characters. And luckily those guys didn't go for that kind of vibe ever again. But so when she showed up in this movie, I'm like, oh, it's that chick from that show that I don't like. I'm like, but she's a beautiful woman, and it makes sense that this guy would travel across this dangerous situation because we get that they are in love, even if they are not currently together in love.
The thing that I love about the setup to this movie, or the calm to this, or the calm before the storm that you mentioned, there's this great moment when Beth, you know, shows up at the party, and you know, Hud is trying to record testimonials, and there's this great moment when, you know, Rob wants to speak to Beth, and Hud goes into the hallway and catches them having an argument about why, you know, Rob didn't call Beth back. And I was like, I would have loved to be able to hear what they said to each other before Hud came into the hallway. But the fact that you don't know exactly what Rob did wrong, I think makes it more intriguing. I mean, look, I love relationship garble. So I love the way that Bad Robot in particular does their teen drama relationship garble. So that was important to me. Also, I love the scene when Robin Hood and his brother go out into the balcony, and they have this moment. I don't know who says it, but one of them says a line very similar to the one that Noel says to Felicity in one of the first episodes, where he says, you have to stay in New York, right? Stay in New York or perish. So he says a very similar line to that. So I'm very, very happy that, to me, or I might be reading into a lot of shit here, But to me, the dialogue of this movie in some sections, specifically that section with them on the outside right before shit starts to go wrong, really felt like Bad Robot to me because of the dialogue and because of the wording that Drew Goddard wrote in that specific moment.
Yeah, it feels very, very Bad Robot. And, you know, getting Drew Goddard to write the script, he was a dude who, he still is a dude. He's not dead. I don't know why I worded it like that. He's a guy who, you know, at the time was mostly known early on for Buffy and Angel. He was a Whedon guy. He was a Whedon guy who then shifted over to being a Bad Robot guy because he worked on Alias, this movie, and Lost. And then he kind of shifted back because he wrote and did Cabin in the Woods with Whedon. So he's been moving between two of the biggest, most powerful producer directors of television of the last 20 years, having these close ties to JJ and Whedon, who one of them we still talk about and one of them we don't. I think was kind of interesting. And it's weird that, you know, Matt Reeves directs this, but so much of the early dialogue feels Felicity-esque. And even though Matt Reeves didn't write Cloverfield, it definitely has some fingerprints that you get the sense that, you know, if Goddard was rewritten at all, Reeves kind of gave it a little bit of the sprinkle of the same sauce that he was using when him and JJ wrote Felicity. What's interesting, I think, is that this movie is a huge hit, and a lot of people recognize the success of it being twofold. The fact that the online campaign leading up to it, that mystery box element that was very much Paramount and Bad Robot working together to create mystery and intrigue around the movie. But then also the fact that for a found footage movie that's an hour and 20 minutes long, Reeves really does use every trick in the book to make sure that this thing holds together. And even when the camera is shaking and you can't tell what's happening, for the most part, you always still get the feeling of what's happening. You can tell who's in danger, who's not, where the threat might be. And when you can't, it's all intentional that you're supposed to feel that disorientation. And I think the shots that they use and the camera work is really well done. The only time I don't like it, and this will be my like critical brain, and I know why they went for it, but the last 8 minutes of the movie is where, you know, there's a helicopter crash and HUD dies, and so then the camera is just kind of there and nobody's actually operating it anymore. And a lot of the stuff is very poorly framed, or like we're just looking at part of a helicopter for a minute, nothing's moving. Finally, we get like 2 extreme close-ups as Beth and Rob have their like crying moment, but we can't really see either of their faces. We just see part of their faces because it's such a tight shot. And then the final shots of the movie, the camera is trapped in rubble as we're hearing stuff happen. And while that escalates the tension of like, oh my God, our main characters are about to die, I found it really annoying. I was like, this is where we need to either drop the conceit or we need to at least cheat it a bit, where they pick up the camera and we get this heroic send off as these 2 characters that we have cared about now by the farm. Like something I just didn't like that at the end, the last 5 to 8 minutes, you can't see jack shit. You might as well be listening to a radio play. And that kind of frustrated me. How did you feel overall about the camera work and those choices specifically?
For the most part, I was really astounded by the camera work and the editing to this movie because I don't know how the fucking hell. I know that there's editing tricks that he could have used to direct this movie, but I don't know how he could physically direct this movie with the camera being in the hands of somebody else the whole time. But to me, there's like a disconnect of going, how in the fuck did they put this together? I'm like, I'm dying to figure out how they did it. In reference to the last section of this movie, I really like the fact that once HUD bites the farm, the camera's on the ground for a minute and you sort of like see the helicopter blade. But I do agree with you that it is extremely frustrating that once Rob and Beth go underneath that little bridge. Their faces are hardly framed, and when the rubble comes down, you can just hear their voice. You can just hear their voices, and in the last moments, they say what they say to each other. But I would have actually rewrote this film to have them get out because I was so invested. Drew Goddard and Matt Reeves did such a great job of investing me to these characters and investing me to Beth and Rob, and specifically that I would have made them get out. I don't know how the fuck I would have got them out of the city, but I would have got them out. The fact that this movie ends the way it does makes it kind of like a bittersweet moment for me because I'm like, well, what the like, did I just sit here for like 80 minutes to watch these two people that I adore while I was sitting here for 80 minutes just to watch them die at the end? What the hell is this? Like I wanted when I was originally watching this movie, I wanted a moment of catharsis. I wanted like a hero moment. And I believe that if JJ was writing this or if Matt Reeves was writing this, I believe that JJ would have probably done it a little differently. I'm not saying that JJ and Matt Reeves weren't involved in the writing process because they probably were, but I would have probably done it a little bit differently just in the end there.
Yeah, I can't argue that they had to die would be like the main thing because I don't believe that they had to die. I know that they have to lose the camera for the conceit of the fact that we're watching this footage that the Department of Defense is now reviewing. But yeah, I think we could have had us, especially because everyone else everyone else in the movie dies, that it would have been nice if we had had a moment where they kind of escaped and at least have their fate be up in the air. Have them have that moment where they think they're going to die, but then have like them escape somehow, and we are left wondering, do they make it? Do they not? How does the camera remain where it is? And let it be a little bit more ambiguous because it really does feel like this movie ends like they die in the end of movie. And it's like so disappointing that, yeah, it's probably what would actually happen if you were trapped in this horrible situation. But it makes for a real downer where, every single person we meet basically is dead by the end of this thing in some manner of horrific way. Whether it's falling to your death or getting bitten by a thing that then explodes your head. What were you thinking of those creatures that, we still don't even know what this what the main monster was or what these parasitic monsters are and what actually happens when they bite you? What did you think of the mystery of these weird pitch black-esque bug things that run around and can explode your face?
I sort of viewed them as like a mini version of what the monster, quote unquote, is in this movie. And I viewed them as like offspring, like some sort of like a tinier version of the big thing that was a big threat in this movie. Other than that, they really reminded me of like some psychotic spiders that you would see in like Lost in Space from '98. They were cool, but again, the fact that we hardly get any fucking answers to how the fuck this thing got there, what the fuck these two little things are, I think add to the mystique of this movie. And you said it earlier, the fact that this movie came out when it did, we didn't have information available to us at the tip of our fingers back in 2008. So the microcosm that this film exists in also helps it, I believe. And the other thing that I think this film did, I mean, you could speak on this. I think that this film gave JJ the idea that everything he makes has to have like a giant mystery box in it, because this thing gave birth to the coolest Easter egg that you and I often look for in JJ properties, the Slusho logo. I think that this movie gave birth to a lot of the mystique of Bad Robot itself as a studio and the backstory between the company that Rob goes to work for.
Yeah, I think that is like the big legacy of this movie was the online Easter egg treasure hunt campaign. And certainly like you could go to like a website that was about two characters getting married, and then one of those characters was passed out in the couch at the party, which would be like a small thing that if you had done all the online stuff, you'd be like, oh, that's that person. But it doesn't actually add up to anything in the movie, really. So it's like all this superfluous stuff that, like, if you got really deep into the online stuff, it would enhance your viewing, but it's not necessary. It's not like you need that information to enjoy the movie. I think now that we're 15 years on from Cloverfield, part of its big legacy was the dynamic marketing being the way to draw people in, and then the fact that it was this what normally would be a big summer blockbuster monster movie done in that handheld found footage style that we just don't see very often. And there were lots of imitators that then tried to do big budget other movies in this style that followed to various degrees of success. There was like a Michael Bay time travel one called Project Almanac. Chronicle was one of the big hits. That's basically, what if we did a superhero movie, but we did it like Cloverfield? And so sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. But people have tried ever since this to replicate that. What if we took this big blockbuster concept and we gave it the Blair Witch treatment, so it becomes what Cloverfield kind of has wrought? Another thing I just want to shout out is that this being Matt Reeves, this was his first big budget foray into directing. It wasn't his first movie that he directed, because he had made a couple of movies that were like very small, most notably also produced by JJ a decade earlier, the David Schwimmer, Gwyneth Paltrow rom-com The Pallbearer, that Reeves directed, wrote, and produced. JJ produced it. But this was his first time doing a big budget thing, and other than Let Me In, he has not looked back. He's only done big budget stuff. And unfortunately, he hasn't done anything with JJ in the feature film space since. So because Reeves now is a huge A-list director in his own right because of his two excellent Planet of the Apes movies and The Batman, I would be interested to see what will happen if these guys get back into a room together to create something original from the ground up. There is still, the legacy of this movie, other than the marketing, is that it has spawned two sequels, but the sequels were actually like, it's an anthology. So they are not direct sequels featuring this same monster or this same scenario. And while Dan Trachtenberg's 10 Cloverfield Lane is incredible, just a great, amazing Hitchcockian, takes a fucked up turn, becomes a Cloverfield movie with a great cast and like very small, Cloverfield Paradox did not work, was really scattershot, felt slapped together, and, overnight went from being a theatrical release to premiering on Netflix after the Super Bowl. And it kind of killed a lot of people's interest in Cloverfield. And now there has been the oft-rumored direct Cloverfield 2, that there is a director attached. It's not Reeves. It's another like up-and-coming guy. And I should mention that even though Cloverfield Paradox was not good, the guy who directed that is the guy who is directing the new Captain America. So like, these are people who go on to do other things after. What do you think? Are we ever going to get the proper Cloverfield 2? Should they do the proper Cloverfield 2? Or do you think the anthology route was kind of the best way to go?
When 10 Cloverfield Lane came out, just to address that real quickly, because like you, I think that movie is a masterclass in intention, and it's just really, really fucking well done. Dan Trachtenberg did a magnificent job directing this movie about these people in this specific situation. I'm not going to give it away if you guys haven't seen it. But to answer your direct question, do I feel that there should be a direct sequel to this film, Cloverfield? I think there should be, but with one caveat. I understand that Matt Reeves is busy doing six different things all the time now. He's got Batman. He's got so many up and coming projects, although he doesn't now because we're in the middle of a writer's strike. But his production company has so many things with Warner Brothers, and he's busy developing the Batman universe with all this shit. So I would accept the direct sequel to Cloverfield, but there's only two caveats that I have. Either bring Drew back to write the thing, or I would love it if JJ and Matt wrote the thing, and they gave it to an up and coming director. But what I want is direct involvement from them. I don't want them to just stick their name on it and then have nothing to do with it, other than the contractual. It's a bad role production, so JJ's name has to be on it. And we've mentioned in the past on the show that Brian Burke, for some reason, is not together with JJ anymore. He's not working with JJ on projects anymore. So I would love it. You have mentioned this before in the past. I would love it if they got the band back together, and if JJ wrote the script, and if Brian Burke came back to produce the film along with perhaps another Bad Robot alum sticking him behind the camera. That's the only way that I would accept a direct sequel to Cloverfield. Because if they're going to do another Cloverfield movie, I would love for them to do it, but have JJ directly involved and bring Matt back to write, or Drew back to write, because God knows what that guy's doing now. I mean, now he's not doing anything, but we haven't heard his name in a long time.
Right. Drew Goddard's been toiling away on a Sinister Six movie that keeps getting close to happening and then not happening, and then close to happening and not happening. So we'll see. And I know he also wrote a script for Spielberg that Spielberg keeps not wanting to make, Robopocalypse, based on a book. But we'll have to see how that pans out. My other interest in a direct Cloverfield sequel is, what would it be? Would it be another tape from 2008? Would it be we find out what happened after this attack in 2008 and it's 20 years later and it happens again? What would the pitch be for the Cloverfield sequel without demystifying this movie too much? Because obviously we kind of would want to know where this monster came from and why, but it might be better if we never really know, and we just think like, oh, if you play the online game, you got a few hints about different companies that could have been involved in this whole thing. What would your pitch, what would you want to see happen for the sequel? Should it be a period piece? Should it be now?
What I would want to see happen for the sequel, I would actually piss you off, because I would actually take a lot of the mythos and spend half of the movie explaining how this fucking monster came to be, and then at the midway point, I would explain the origin. See, this is why you're gonna hate it. I would explain the origin of what the monster is, but at some point, I would bring the story up to where Beth and Rob are in the tunnel, and then I would finish the movie with explaining what happened to them if they got out, or if they're dead, or what happened with them. So essentially, I would write a movie explaining the Cloverfield mythos, because that's the one thing that's always intrigued me the most in reference to the company that may or may not be behind this monster. The Slusho thing has enraptured my mind for as long as I've been a JJ fan. So I would delve into that. Now, I understand that's not what you want, but that's the direction that I would go towards. How would you handle it?
The best thing that they could do would be it's 20 years later and everyone has moved on from the tragedy and we never really found out what happened. And then what happens when another monster surfaces in a different locale, and seeing, it would be a lot of the movie would be kind of like the Searching and Missing series, where like most of that movie takes place on a computer screen. This would be like footage that we're looking at would be fucking TikToks and shit of everyone in different places posting about this event. Because now, like I said, this movie wouldn't work the same way if it was now, because everybody would be posting, and it would be a lot of sifting through different perspectives to try and figure out what was misinformation and what was true. But I think that actually could be really interesting to see what would happen if a monster attack happened now, and how that would filter onto social media and, TV news as it is now, and how that would play out. But I don't want them to fully explain, like I don't want like a 5-minute video that gives us the entire info dump that explains Cloverfield 1 before we tee up like this is going to happen again. I think that would be the most interesting. But also, if they just wanted to do 20 years later, we still have questions, and somehow they unearth a tape from that night from a different perspective that will give us some answers, but not all. and is still, handheld found footage. That could be intriguing. But I also do think it was smart that they never did the direct sequel. At least that's how I felt after 10 Cloverfield Lane, and then didn't feel that way after Cloverfield Paradox. So it'll be interesting because there is a lot more to explore there. And it would also be a curveball if they did a direct sequel that was actually just a regular narrative movie, did not have found footage be a part of it at all, and was just a monster flick where we did get characters who work for the military and find out what did happen. That could be cool too. So I think there's a couple different ways they could approach it.
In my pitch for the movie, I would have forgo the found footage angle to it, and I would have actually done it as a straight up movie. On the other hand, there is something really cool about having this first Cloverfield movie be the way it is. And I feel unless they have a really, really good story and a really, really good take to place it, a really good place to take it, I don't think that Cloverfield needs to be revisited again. I don't want another Cloverfield movie unless the band comes back together.
There was rumors that maybe it would be taking characters from the other Cloverfields and crossing them over into this. So we know that Mary Elizabeth Winstead's character escapes at the end of 10 Cloverfield Lane. And they said that maybe it would be like her and Gugu from Cloverfield Paradox, meet up. And this movie has had a bunch of people who have worked on it. So they do have a script. They have a script. It's not a JJ or a Matt Reeves joint. It was written by a guy named Joe Barton. So that was last year. They gave an update saying Babak Anvari would be the director of this movie. It was written by a guy named Joe Barton, and that they brought on a couple extra producers alongside JJ to work on it. And the only thing that they sort of told us was that it would be a direct sequel. And Matt Reeves has said, whatever it is, again, it would be something we would keep under wraps until you're in the theater. You wouldn't know much about it. So I think that's intriguing, but also frustrating as hell. So I don't know, especially with the way, obviously we're in the middle of a writer and actor strike, and also Paramount would have to make this, and Bad Robot and Paramount's relationship is not where it once was. So I'm not sure that we're ever going to see that. But if we do, hopefully it would be something good.
I really like the idea that you brought up of seeing Matt and JJ do something smaller scale. But I really believe that Matt, when I say Matt, I'm talking about Matt Reeves, obviously. I think that he is so, I'm not saying that he's forgotten where he came from, but he has gotten so busy with the Batman universe that I think it's going to be a long time before he writes something smaller or something akin to Felicity or anything of that ilk, unfortunately.
But we'll have to keep an eye out, and hopefully when all these work stoppages stop and the studios agree to a fair deal and stop being greedy bastards, then we can get some updates on what Reeves and Abrams and the Cloverfield universe is doing. So that'll do it for this episode of Radio 815. If you guys have any questions, comments, feedback, you can reach out to us using the hashtag Radio 815 or at JJUniverse815. Any comments or questions we get, we will read on the show. If you guys want to get in touch with me, I am on Elon's bullshit at Matt Crandall. Marcelo, people can also reach out to you on X. What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I'm also with Matt in the house that Elon built. Really, not really. I'm at Creek Fanatic 88 if you have any questions for me at all. But hey guys, if you like the show and you want to catch up on our back catalog, we also have a YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/radio15. So go over there, subscribe, and catch up on our back catalog.
Yeah, so please follow, subscribe the pod anywhere you get podcasts, or as Marcelo mentioned, on YouTube. Thanks a lot for listening. Until next time, Radio 815, over and out.
Radio 815 is a Balloonhead Productions presentation in association with Killer Newt Productions.